Okay, yeah. Let me just keep recalling as people coming. So H is a Hilbert space. Then what we found was that if H has a complete orthonormal sequence, say phi 1, phi 2, etc. So, if H has a complete orthonormal sequence, then we can identify H with L2. If it is a real Hilbert space, it is with L2R. If it is a complex Hilbert space, it is complex L2C. What is this identification? The identification is as follows. So, for any x in H, because it is an complete orthonormal sequence, we have the Fourier series. Okay, we have Fourier series x equal to summation n equal to 1 to infinity x phi n phi n. I call these coefficients, so let x hat be the vector whose coefficients are x1, x2, where xn is x phi m. Okay. Then this is the identification. Then phi maps H to L2. The phi of any vector x is this x hat. Okay. So, every vector in an abstract Hilbert space has now been identified with a number sequence which is in L2. And this when I say identified, what we really mean, vectors here are identified with vectors there, and this identification is complete in the sense that phi is 1 1 linear, it preserves superpositions, distinct vectors are identified with distinct vectors, and completely exhaustive. Okay. Norm preserving, the image norm, phi x will be in L2, the phi x L2 norm will be the x norm in the Hilbert space H. Okay. The original norm and the identified norm are same, and inner products are preserved. That is, if we take two vectors and look at their identification, both are in L2, take the L2 inner product, that is the same as the Hilbert space inner product. So, it is a fantastic identification, geometry, arithmetic, metrization, everything is completely identified, so there is no sum. This is what we had last time. So, we will simply write that H is congruent to L2. This is a simple notation we will use. Therefore, H is congruent to L2. Anything happens here happens in that Hilbert space. Anything happening in that Hilbert space can be identified to happen in this Hilbert space. And in particular, since this is separable, this will also be separable. Since we have already seen that L2 is separable, it follows H must be separable. So, therefore, if the Hilbert space has a complete orthonormal sequence, then it must be a separable Hilbert space. So, the conclusion is the following. H has a complete orthonormal sequence implies H is separable. Now we will also see that the converse is true. So separable inverse Hilbert space means it must have a complete orthonormal sequence. So therefore the separable Hilbert spaces are the ones which copy our n-dimensional geometry. We pull it up to, instead of n vectors forming a basis, a sequence of vectors forming an orthonormal basis. Okay. Conversely, let H be a separable Hilbert space. Okay. Of course, we are assuming infinite dimensions, because finite dimensions is all linear algebra, it's over. So we are assuming separable infinite dimensional Hilbert space. Then is H, does H possess a complete orthonormal sequence, that is a basis which consists of only a sequence of vectors. Now, we know that every Hilbert space has a complete orthonormal set, and any two complete orthonormal sets will be of the same size, cardinality. So all we have to show is, take any orthonormal set which is complete and show it cannot be uncountable, show that it has to be uncountable. So let K be any complete orthonormal set in H. We shall show that K must be countable, infinite one, countable. Then we will have every complete orthonormal set is countable, and therefore it has to have a countable orthonormal sequence. Every Hilbert space must have a complete thing, and we have shown that every complete will be countable, therefore it has a countable orthonormal sequence. So we have to show that if the space is separable, then any complete orthonormal set must be countable. Okay. So what is given to us? We are given that it is a separable Hilbert space. What is meant by separability? It simply means that there is a sample set which is the minimal infinity that we can think of, optimal sample set, countably infinite set which samples everything with as much accuracy as possible, which means that there is a countable set which is dense in H. So H is separable implies there exists a countable dense subset. That is all separability means. Dense means things can be approximated as closely as you want from this set. Countable means it is optimal infinity, smallest infinity we can think of. So it's there must be a countable dense set. Okay. What are we trying? This is given. So this is what we have. We want to show that K must be countable. So suppose not. Suppose K is not countable. So countable dense subset D say. Suppose K is not countable. Therefore K is uncountable. Right? Now, if you take any two fellows in K, they are orthogonal. When two fellows are orthogonal and their length is 1, the distance between them will be what? square root of 2. So, take for any x and y, suppose xy. So, xy belongs to k, x not equal to y implies the distance between x and y squared, which is x minus y comma x minus y, which is x comma x plus y comma y minus x comma y minus y comma x. X comma x is the length of x, because it is an orthonormal set, the length is 1. Y comma y, because it is an orthonormal set, everybody has length 1. And because it is an orthonormal set, x and y are orthogonal, that is 0. Y and x are orthogonal, that is 0, that is 2. So, that says the distance between x and minus x and y is square root of 2. Okay. So, what does this mean? If you have an orthonormal set, whatever be size for the time being, if you have an orthonormal set, any two fellows are sitting at a fixed distance of square root of 2 from each other, right. So, now what I do is the following. Take a fellow in K and then draw a sphere or open ball of radius alpha, okay, let me fix radius, root 2 by 3. Okay. So, let us call this as a sphere of radius root 2 by 3 centered at x. Okay. Now, take another y which is in K, y not equal to x, and take that y and again look at s root 2 by 3 y. Will these two spheres intersect? They will not intersect because the distance between them is root 2. So, I have taken the diameter in such a way, from here to here it is root 2, but from here to here it is root 2 by 3, here to here it is root 2 by 3. So, totally I still have got 2 root 2 by 3, I have got a gap. Okay. So, these two will not intersect. So, how many such spheres are there then? As many elements in K as there are for each such element, I will get one sphere. So, the number of the cardinality of all such spheres, all such balls, is the same as the cardinality of K. As many elements in K are there, that many spheres are there. Okay. Now, because D is dense, I must be able to approximate every one of these fellows within an error of root 2 by 3, and therefore, there must be an element of D in each one of these sphere. Okay. Since D is dense, there exists an x dx in D such that dx belongs to s root 2 by 3 x for every x in K. So, therefore, how many dx's are there? For each sphere there is one dx. So, there must be at least as many dx's as there are K, but K is uncountable, and therefore, there must be uncountable number of elements in D. Contradiction, because D is countable. Okay. This implies the cardinality of D must be greater than at least as many elements in K, which implies D is uncountable. Contradiction, because we were given the space was separable and the D was a countable dense set, and therefore, our starting point that suppose K is not countable is false. So, therefore, K must be countable. So, I can make this conclusion as H as a complete orthonormal sequence if and only if H is separable. So, what is the theorem we have? Thus, our theorem becomes H has a countable orthonormal sequence, complete orthonormal sequence. I am writing sequence there, so I don't write, as a complete orthonormal sequence if and only if H is separable. So, every separable Hilbert space has to have a sequence of orthonormal vector which form an orthonormal basis for it, and the moment you have an orthonormal sequence which forms a basis, it must be separable. Now, let's pursue this a little bit more. So, what does this say? The moment you have a separable Hilbert space, it has a sequence. If it has a sequence, then I can identify it with L2. So, with it, this means that if and only if H is congruent to L2. Same thing as saying H is congruent to L2. But we have seen that little L2 can be identified as with a countable set omega, with the where omega is a countable set. So, it can be identified with the L2 space with the countable set and the counting measure that we went through the whole thing. Okay, therefore, what it says is every separable Hilbert space is essentially the capital L2 space of functions defined on a countably infinite set, and the measure being the counting measure. So, what is this? Remember this. This is equal to the set of all functions from omega to c if it is complex, such that integral mod f squared d with respect to the counting measure is finite. The integration with respect to the counting measure. So, therefore, every separable Hilbert space is congruent to this either little L2, which in turn is congruent to this capital L2 space. Only thing is, it is the measure now that we are talking about is the counting measure. Now, we will do some messy mixing up of the measures now. Suppose I take this space, consider the space L2 0 to pi. Okay. Consider this space L2 0 to pi, and what classically Fourier did was he showed the set K is equal to e to the I n t by root 2 pi n belonging to Z is an orthonormal, is a complete orthonormal sequence in L2 0. That is what Fourier series for finite energy signals is. Okay, that is all the theory about Fourier series of finite energy signals, that everything can be expanded in terms of this e to the I n t with the integral frequencies n. Okay. Okay. Therefore, what does that mean? That means it is must be, therefore, L2 0 to pi. When I say L2 0 to pi, what do I mean? Here all those functions which are mapped from 0 to pi to c, such that the integral, now what measure? This is the Lebesgue measure for the usual integration that we do, less than infinity, right. So, now we have an L2 space with respect to the Lebesgue measure, and because it is a Hilbert space and has countably infinite sequence of orthonormal bases, by this that fellow must be isomorphic to this space, okay, and there this, okay. Hence L2 0 to pi must be congruent to little L2. How is this identification now? That's what every function f now is identified with its Fourier coefficients, where f at n belonging to z, where f at n is 1 over root 2 pi f of t e to the minus int dt 0 to 2 pi. That's the Fourier coefficients, and that's why we have this continuous time is converted to discrete frequency. This is what happening in the Fourier series business. We have a continuous function which gets function defined for a continuum time converted to a discrete frequency. Okay, that's what all Fourier series is. Okay, now we know that this is L2 of z. Here is L2 over z now, because the variables, the coefficients vary from minus infinity to infinity, but that is the same as can be identified with the capital L2 with the counting measure on the integral set. So the Lebesgue measure L2 space can be identified with the counting measure L2 space on the right set. Okay. So basically, therefore, it says that just whenever you talk about L2, you always can come to counting measure. You don't have to work with arbitrary measures at all. If it is separable, it always, whatever was your measure, if it was a separable Hilbert space, it will have an orthonormal sequence, convert it to L2, which is becoming to counting measure. So you can always bring it back to this discrete situation. Okay, and that's what Fourier said. That is where Fourier series started. Okay, and in fact, this is a very interesting theory. Fourier series of this classical Fourier series itself is a very interesting theory, with has a lot of convergence results running over a period of 150 years. Okay, from the time Fourier did it, and it got finally one kind of level of proofs till in the late 60s, mid 60s, 1960s. Fourier started it in 1810. So it's about 150 years of history of classical analysis. And things started moving only after 1900, really moving after 1900, when Lebesgue came up with the Lebesgue integration, and then everything started moving. Okay, so now therefore we see that this thought of converting to a separable Hilbert space through a complete orthonormal sequence always brings back whatever is your Hilbert space to little L2, which can be identified with the capital L2 of functions on a countable set with the counting measure. And we also saw the Gram-Schmidt process, and we saw how various orthonormal polynomials are generated using the Gram-Schmidt process. Okay, so this is the story about separable Hilbert spaces. So obviously, if I take a non-separable Hilbert space, it must have a complete orthonormal set. Every Hilbert space is a complete orthonormal set. That's we proved yesterday using Zorn's lemma. Every Hilbert space must have a complete orthonormal set, and that cannot be countable because it is not separable, and therefore non-separable Hilbert spaces have uncountable orthonormal sets. I will just briefly mention that. So a non-separable Hilbert space H must therefore have a complete an uncountable complete orthonormal set. In fact, every complete orthonormal set must be uncountable, because if it has one uncountable complete, all of them must be the same cardinality. So, any complete orthonormal set must be uncountable. So, what does that mean? I can't index the orthonormal vectors now as phi 1, phi 2, phi 3, but I will have to index them like phi of alpha, where alpha runs through not the integers, but by a over an uncountable set, like maybe it is the continuum, or it may be the irrational numbers, or whatever it is, very bad uncountable set. So, hence we must have an uncountable set omega such that we can write the complete orthonormal set as k equal to phi alpha, where alpha runs through an index set which is uncountable. Okay. So, it's like, for example, for every time t you have an orthonormal vector phi t. So, then you have an uncountable number of orthonormal vectors. Now, this is a very tricky situation, not really tricky. What happens then is, you now consider L2 omega counting measure. Okay, L2 omega counting measure. What is this? It is the set of all functions from omega to c such that f t is not equal to 0, or the support of f. Remember, I called it support of f is either finite or countably infinite. Though the function is defined on an uncountable set, it takes non-zero values only on a countable set, such that this is true. And now, if you will add all the values where t runs over the support of f, that must be finite. It is just mimicking the L2 space, except that the summation is done over different sets now. For each function, the support will be different, so the summation will be done over different sets. And this is what is meant by the square integral of the function over the counting measure. Okay. The mass is at individual points, so it picks up the value and then adds them up. Okay. And then our h will be congruent to L2 omega. Identified. Okay, completely. So, what does this say? Again, the Hilbert space, what is identified with an L2 space, with the right L2 space in counting measure. Only thing is, now the domain space for the function is uncountable. Okay. So, basically, therefore, we have the following situation. Suppose H is a Hilbert space. Okay. There are various possibilities. The case 1 is H is finite dimensional, dimension of H is say capital N. So, it is a finite dimensional Hilbert space. Then this is congruent to L2n. That is our usual n dimensional vector space, with the norm being defined as sum of the squares, the Euclidean norm, that vector space, which in turn can be identified counting norm L2 omega counting set, where omega is the set 1, 2, 3 n. Okay. The second is H is infinite dimensional separable. In that case, we have seen it is congruent to just L2, and this is congruent to L2 omega, where omega is countable infinite set. The third case is H is infinite dimensional non-separable. In that case, that is congruent to L2 omega, where omega is now uncountable set, suitable omega. Everything always omega suitable uncountable set, suitable countable set. Okay. So what this really boils down to saying is, whatever be the any Hilbert space is essentially in L2 space over counting measure with a suitable domain. So all you need is this counting measure and proper sets of for the domain for the functions. So these are all the only all Hilbert spaces therefore are various avatars of this L2 space and counting measure. By changing these omegas we get various L2 various Hilbert spaces. That's all it says. Okay. So basically therefore there is a proverb in Tamil which it says that உரித்து பார்த்தால் வெங்காயத்தில் ஒன்றும் இருக்காது. So you keep on peeling the layers of the onion, finally there is nothing in it. Okay. So there are so many Hilbert spaces, you go on peeling and see what is in it. Nothing. This is the same thing in every onion. There is the same L2 is coming up eventually. So these are the only spaces. Only Hilbert spaces is to study counting measure and a suitable domain space for the functions. Okay. So the L2 space. So finite energy signals properly defined. So basically he says they can all be thought of as delta functions. Okay. Because these are all counting measure now. Each point picks up a value. So essentially the delta combs, these start coming into the picture. But now the comb may start closing in closer and closer, it may become uncountable. And that's when you get into the Fourier transform type of things. Okay. So this connection is there already, and that's what is seen in all these Fourier transform and Fourier series, and very cleverly exploited by the signal processing people. Okay. Now that's one aspect of Hilbert space. To say that there may be Hilbert spaces and there may be Hilbert spaces, but they are all same, essentially L2 spaces. Okay. On the right setup, on a right setup, they will all be L2 spaces identified with L2 spaces. So L2 spaces are the only Hilbert spaces to be studied. There is really nothing else. Okay. That's why again this measure theory comes into very handy, because everything is integration there. Okay. So that is basically one fundamental structure of the Hilbert spaces. The fundamental structure is that they must have a complete orthonormal set, and because of which they can be identified with a suitable L2 space. That's the first fundamental structure theorem for Hilbert spaces, and that will be exploited. So see, we have already studied this. The next important thing is to study this, and this will involve all integration with respect to measures, the counting measure. This can still be handled nicely because it will be converted to this L2 and everything can be studied discretized. This discretization is not possible here in this case, because everything is going to be uncountable. You can't separate them. The discretization comes when things can be separated out, and there it cannot be separated out. You have to treat it as a continuum, and therefore the deltas will start gap closing in, and then you start getting into the full spectrum. Right. So the next important aspect of Hilbert spaces is again coming out of orthogonality. All these are results because coming out of orthogonality. The Hilbert space, the speciality is it has an inner product, and because of which we have the notion of orthogonality, and because of which we had this orthonormal sets business, and that led to all these things. Okay. Now we'll explore, we'll again look at what all the other things that this orthogonality or this geometry forces on us or helps us to get idea about the structure of the Hilbert space. Okay. Now first let me, so I will call this chapter as approximation theorem. Basically what we are going to do is all the notions of this least square approximation that we have, we are trying to get in this properly put in this language of the Hilbert spaces. So the first thing that we recall is the following. I have a Hilbert space I don't worry whether it is, in fact at the moment I don't even need Hilbert space, I can talk about inner product space. Okay, so we will see if at all where I am nowhere will be using Hilbert space. The only part extra needed for Hilbert space from inner product space is completeness. So only when completeness is needed we need Hilbert space, otherwise we can do all these things in an inner product space. So suppose I have a Hilbert space and I have a finite number of orthonormal vectors, a finite orthonormal set. It may not be complete. I am not saying it is a complete orthonormal set. All I am saying is I am picking up finite number of orthonormal sets. So then I look at the vectors, the subspace spanned by these vectors. So LS, the span of these vectors, which is the set of all vectors of this form A1 phi 1 plus AN phi n, where these AJs are complex numbers. If it is a complex Hilbert space, take complex numbers. If it is a real Hilbert space, take real numbers. Okay. So I look at all the linear combinations of this phi 1, phi 2, phi n, that is the subspace spanned by these vectors phi 1, phi 2, phi n. So I have this Hilbert space. Inside that is sitting this LS. Okay. Now suppose I can get information for some reason only in LS. I am not able to make any measurements outside. So what I will do is, you give me any vector x in H, I will first find who is his closest friend in LS and find information about him. Okay. So in other words, given x in H, who is the fellow closest to him? You just take the components, we have seen that x comma phi 1 phi 1, x comma phi 2 phi 2, etc. Then define Wx to be equal to summation j equal to 1 to n x comma phi j. This certainly is in W because the linear combination of phi 1 phi 2 phi n. Then Wx belongs to W. I'm sorry, I will call this LS, right? Wx belongs to LS, and then 2, if we now calculate the distance between x and Wx, so here is Wx is in LS. If we calculate the distance between x and Wx and calculate the distance between x and W for any other vector, then this is certainly small. That is the smallest, in other words, that approximates x with the least error. Okay. For every W not equal to Wx, W belongs to LS. So that is Wx is the best approximation of x from from LS vectors. That's the best approximation. Any other vector will give more error. Okay. This we have seen through while calculating Bessel's inequality. Okay. Now, in particular, if x was sitting inside, x is equal to Wx. Okay. So, in particular, already he is there. So, he is his own best approximation. Okay. If x belongs to H, clearly, I am sorry, Ls, clearly Wx equal to x. Okay. Now, we want to generalize this. Try to see what should be the generalization. Now, there are two ways of going to generalization. We can go through orthonormal sets. I am not going to go to orthonormal sets. I am going through something else for the simple reason that will allow us a better, even a better generalization. Okay, the orthonormal set business will not allow the second generalization. So, what we will do? What is the question? What we will do is we will replace this by a general subspace. Instead of Ls, take a general subspace W. Take a vector x and try to approximate by W vectors. Now, the W now need not be finite dimensional even. Now, you see this Ls is finite dimensional. It is generated by these vectors phi 1, phi 2, phi n. But now, I am going to replace that by a general subspace and ask whether I can do such approximation. That is, so let W be any subspace of H. Let W be any subspace of H. That is, now I have H and now I have W. Then question, given x in H, can we find Wx in W such that x minus Wx gives you the smallest error and Wx is unique. That is, if I put anything other than Wx here, it will be strictly less than. That is the next question. So, first of all, whether I can even get, maybe there are many fellows who approximate, but I want to see whether there will be uniqueness also. I do not even know whether I can approximate. Next question is, probably if I approximate, there may be many. Is it going to be unique? First of all, can I get a best approximation, least square approximation, and if so, is it unique? Okay. And we will first look at an example to show that we may have to refine this question. So, I will give you a simple example, deliberately give a complicated simple example. Okay. Oh, what do you call it? Okay. So, then we will refine that question and we will go to the first approximation theorem. Then we will look at the next generalization of it. Okay, an example. Let us take H to be L2 over R or C, it does not matter. Okay. Let us take L2 space. What does it mean? All sequences, sum of squares of the components is finite. So, we are going to look at L2, which is the set of all sequences such that summation n equal to 1 to infinity mod x n squared is finite, and with the usual norm and the inner product, okay, the same usual stuff. So, that is what we are going to look at, the little L2. Then this is replaced by L2 now. Now, I am going to take a subspace W. Let us look at a subspace W to be equal to I am going to take all those vectors in little L2 such that for every vector after some stage the coordinates will all be 0. In other words, only finite number of coordinates will be non-zero for each vector. So, we will have the set of all x in L2 such that for every x there exists an integer nx such that xj equal to 0 for j greater than nx. All the coordinates beyond a certain stage will be 0, but different vectors may have different stages beyond which is 0. One vector, second component always everything may be 0. Another vector, 100th component onwards everything may be 0. Another vector, a millionth component onwards everything may be 0. One vector may be 0 completely. Okay. All the components may be 0. So, clearly this is a subspace, because if you take two vectors of this type, their sum will also have only a finite number of non-zero components, and if I multiply a vector of this type by a number, that will still have only a finite number of non-zero components. So, W is clearly a subspace. A subspace of L2. So, now I have this setup. First I have this, and this W is that subspace. What is the next thing? I have to give a vector x in H. Right. Now I am going to give that vector. Okay. So I have this setup. H is now L2. W is that space, and now I am going to give a vector x which is not in W. Okay. X is the vector. It has to have infinite number of components. So I am going to write 1, half, 1/3, 1/4, etc. Its nth component is 1 by n. And clearly summation xj squared n equal to 1 to infinity is some n equal to 1 to infinity 1 by n squared. This is a convergent series, and in fact its sum is pi squared by 6. That is finite. So therefore x belongs to L2, and x does not belong to W because it has an infinite number of components which are non-zero. Is that okay? Right. So now I am going to do the following. Let me finish this. I am going to define a new vector called xn, which I will get from this by taking only the first n components and the remaining as 0, 1, half, 1 over n, 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. Now does it belong? So for n equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. So we get a sequence of vectors now. All these are in W now. Why? Because they have only a finite number of non-zero coordinates. So xn's belong to W. Now what happens to xn minus x? What is the square of this? It will be simply n plus 1 to infinity mod xk squared, right? Because first n components get knocked off, and the remaining components only x stays, xn nothing is counted. What can I say about this as n goes to infinity? That will go to 0 because this is the tail end of a convergent series. The tail end of the convergent series will go to 0. So this tends to 0 as n tends to infinity, because summation mod 1 by 1 by n squared is convergent series. Okay. So, therefore, it says xn minus x tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. What does that mean? I can make that difference as small as possible, however far you go. So, given any epsilon positive, there exists an n epsilon such that norm x n epsilon minus x is less than epsilon. Okay. Now, we are done. Now, it follows that we can't do this, because whatever vector you choose, I can make the difference smaller than that, because that fellow will be there. So, let W be any vector in W, then epsilon equal to norm x minus W is greater than 0. Why? W is in W, x is outside. So, x and W are two different vectors, and therefore, the length must be greater than 0. And because of this, there exists an n epsilon such that norm x n epsilon minus x is less than norm x epsilon, which is equal to norm x minus W. What does that say? Whatever vector you choose in W, there is another vector, it is just a better approximation, and therefore, there is nothing like the best approximation. Every approximation can be bettered, and therefore, there is no best. Okay. So, this says for every W in W, there exists a vector in W which approximates x better than W. Therefore, there exists no best approximation. Right? So, this question does not make sense. Obviously, it is not going to work. There is going to be difficulty. So, we have to refine this question properly. Obviously, we made some mistakes. Such things will happen. Why is this thing happening? This thing is happening because I was able to get to x through W vectors, and that is why that error can be made as small as possible, which means x is a limit point of W. X is a limit point of W which is outside W. That means W is not a closed subspace. If I had made a W the closed subspace, this example is thrown out. It is not allowed. Okay. So, now let us refine the question. So, this happens because x is a limit point of W and x does not belong to W. That is, W is not a closed subspace. So, let us refine the question. So, we refine the question as follows. So, whenever you are doing approximations through non-closed subspaces, there is nothing like a best approximation. Okay. You can do very good approximations, but not, you can do better and better, but not the best. Okay, that's what it means. We refine the question as follows: H Hilbert space, W a closed subspace given X in H, can we get Wx in W such that 1, it gives the least error for every W in W, and is it unique? Is it the only vector, is there only one vector which will approximate best with the least error, or will there be many vectors which will approximate with the least error? So, this is now a question for which that example is ruled out, because I am asking for a closed sub. The answer is yes. Okay, now the answer is and this is a very fundamental theorem which will lead to many things. Okay, the so called orthogonal decompositions and orthogonal fundamental idea of projection, orthogonal projection. Okay, but now here we will go back. If we just think back finite dimensional spaces, how did we achieve this best? Suppose W was a finite dimensional subspace like phi 1, phi 2, phi n we had. How did we achieve this best approximation? By simply taking the components of X along these W's of the phi 1, phi 2, phi n and constructing a vector out of it. Same thing we could have done here also. Since W is a subspace, it is a closed subspace, that is a smaller Hilbert space sitting in a bigger Hilbert space, and then so any closed subspace of Hilbert space is a Hilbert space because it has the inner product, it is closed, and so on. So now we can get an orthonormal set here, because any Hilbert space will have an orthonormal set, and then take the components of X along this, only a countable number of them will be non-zero, and then construct the vector, you will get, and you can show that that is the best approximation. So purely through orthonormal sets we can go through the proof exactly as we did in when W was a finite dimensional space. But I am not going to do that. I am going to give a different proof, because I will generalize, lift this theorem further up, a much bigger generalization we will look at. So that, so one proof is to mimic the case where we had W as spanned by a finite number of orthonormal vectors, okay, and proceed the same way. Okay. Now we look at a different proof. We look at alternate proof. Which uses the parallelogram law. See, in a Hilbert space, the parallelogram law is valid. What is that? Length of u plus v whole squared plus length of u minus v whole squared is twice length of u squared plus length of v squared. That simple thing. Okay, the sum of the squares of the diagonals is equal to twice the sum of the squares of the sides. The classical parallelogram law in Euclidean geometry is true even in this abstract setup. We have to simply use that, and then we will get the result. Okay. What I will do is I will just in 2 minutes indicate the proof, what are the ideas, and we will do the proof really in the next class. So, what is the idea? Supposing you have this W and you have this X. So, W is a closed set, and we are trying to find the smallest distance from x to w. So what we are really doing is we are looking at the distance between x and w. What is that? What is the meaning of this? Look at the distance between x and any vector in w and look at the minimum. We want to show that there is a minimum. At the moment we do not know whether it is a minimum, but since they are all bounded below by 0, there is at least a greatest lower bound. So that we will call it as infimum. So look at the greatest lower bound of all the distances, or if this is the same as the infimum of w belonging to w of norm x minus w. Now what we want to show is to show that there exists a wx in w such that this distance, minimum distance, is attained, such that this is equal to norm x minus wx. That is indeed the greatest lower bound is attained. The greatest lower bound is indeed a minimum, and that is what we want to show. Okay. And we will exploit the closedness of this. Now what does this really mean? I will take 2 minutes probably. Yeah, maybe I will do it in the next class. We will understand what is meant by the distance between a point and a set. We will look at it a little bit more closely, and then we will see what is going on here. We will now use the fact that it is a Hilbert space for the first time. Okay, that it is a Hilbert space. We will also use the fact that it is closed. This w is closed. So every one of the hypotheses will be used. We will not be using the full power of the fact that w is a subspace. We will be using only a small property of the subspace, and that small property is available in any convex set, and therefore the theorem will be changed to, this question will be changed to, even if H is a Hilbert space and W is a closed convex set, this theorem approximation will be true. Okay. So therefore that is why this proof is given. In this proof we will explicitly see what is the power of the subspace that we are using. If you go to this orthonormal set proof, the moment you want to construct a basis, you are already assuming it is a full subspace. So we are using the full power of the subspace. But when you look at this proof, we see that we are not really using fully the fact that it is subspace. Only some very special property inside a subspace we are using, but that property is valid even without the fact that it is a subspace. As long as it is a convex set, that will be true, and we will show therefore this approximation theorem is true even if W is a closed convex set. Now that is what I will do on Monday. Okay. So next week our usual schedule, Monday 3 to 4 and Friday 5 to 6.